The Sony ZV-E10 is a fantastic, popular camera that is perfect for video creators. Unfortunately, it has some pretty big downsides, ranging from irritating to seriously debilitating. In this video, we'll have a look at 5 issues to be aware of and what you can do to combat them. And first up, this issue really only comes up if you use the built-in streaming mode on the ZV-E10. But seeing as it's a heavily advertised feature of this camera, it is a strange design choice to have the USB cable covering the articulating screen when using the live streaming mode. I use this camera a lot as a webcam, and a good portion of the screen is being obscured by the supplied USB cable when you are live streaming. You basically just can't see the screen properly, which is really baffling because it's a very easy way of monitoring yourself without having to use anything extra. Now, this design choice was probably influenced by the practical limitations of the camera, but it doesn't make for a great user experience. So my fixes for this issue are limited, but one thing you can do is buy a 90-degree angled USB-C cable, which is a low-cost fix. That would cover up less of the screen. The best but most expensive is to use an external monitor mounted to either the hot shoe on the camera or a separate mount. I've been using the DesView R5 for a couple of years, and you can pick one of them up for around $150. But it's a frustrating purchase for a problem that shouldn't be there. And the cable isn't my only issue with live streaming on this camera. Using the built-in USB streaming option is great because it's fast to set up and only requires you to use the supplied USB cable. Unfortunately, this comes with a big downside, and that is the camera can only stream at a max resolution of 1280 by 720, which is 720p, a far cry from the 4K recording this camera is capable of. A limitation again of the hardware for sure, but when you buy a 4K camera with inbuilt live streaming, it's a major frustration for that camera to not only not be capable of 4K, but not even 1080p live streaming. Now, it is worth saying that the 720p live streaming does look pretty good, and I often do get comments on video calls from how good the quality is. So it's not that the 720p looks terrible, but if you want to stream to the fullest capabilities of this camera, then you're going to need to buy and use a 4K capture card, which instead of being connected to the USB port is connected to the camera's micro HDMI port. Now, this requires buying something extra, such as the Elgato Camlink 4K, which currently cost around $90 and does take a little bit of extra setting up compared to just using the USB cable. If you want to see exactly how to set up a camera using a capture card, then check out my video about it here. And if you're enjoying this video, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as it helps me out a lot. Now, our next tip is if you've been using the ZV-E10 for any amount of time, you'll know that the rolling shutter looks, well, awful when recording video and when you are moving around. You get a wobbly, distorted look that looks really unprofessional. For a camera that is aimed at vloggers, it's not a good look. And by now, 18 months after the camera's release, I was really hoping there would be a firmware update by now, which would have come out to at least help, if not entirely fix this. Well, I was wrong. So to combat this, there are a few fixes you can try. First of all, you could download a piece of software called Catalyst Browse, which is made by Sony. Using the software's Stabilize feature, you can begin to combat this wobbly rolling shutter. But for this to work, you'll have to have the camera's steady shot stabilization already turned off, which, if it's footage you have already taken and can't recreate, isn't a hugely helpful tip, as you may have already had active steady shot activated. So you can also combat this by using editing software, most of which have a rolling shutter fix effect. In Premiere, for example, it's called the rolling shutter repair effect, and with some tweaking of the settings can begin to remove these distortion artifacts, but again, not an amazing fix. So overall, these fixes really are only papering over the cracks of what is a big issue, which is simply the rolling shutter shouldn't be this bad on such a new camera. And staying in the realm of stabilization, the stabilization on this camera leaves a lot to be desired. With no IBIS, which is in-body stabilization, you are reliant on either in-lens stabilization or software stabilization, which is built into the camera and is called Active Steady Shot, which we have just mentioned. With Active Steady Shot turned on, you can massively help reduce the noticeable movement when using the ZV-E10 for video. Great as it is, of course, this comes with a cost, which is your shot will be cropped in approximately 1.5 times, which seriously reduces the scope of the frame and can alter your shot massively, which can be an issue when vlogging, as you'll lose a lot of your background. Now you can turn this setting on and off by going to Menu, Camera Settings 2, and then Steady Shot. Certainly well worth giving a go, as the next fix comes again at a price, and that is using a gimbal. A gimbal is a device designed to steady your camera, but is bulky when compared to the ZV-E10 by itself, and even though they aren't as expensive as they once were, is an expense all the same. There are decent options available from around $200, which are for pretty compact and well-reviewed gimbals, so well worth checking out if you really need better stabilization on this camera. Overall though, this camera feels like it should have IBIS for the price, which would have helped out with this an awful lot. And the fifth thing we're going to talk about is the battery on this camera. This camera uses Sony's MP-FW50 battery, which originally came out all the way back in 2013. It's been in lots of their more compact cameras, such as the trusty A5100. In the ZV-E10, a full charge can record for around 80 minutes, or around 440 photos. And most of the time, that is okay. And having a backwards compatible battery with older cameras is definitely a plus. For 4K video especially, it does seem to burn through the batteries very quickly. Now, my main fix for this, other than buying more batteries and keeping them charged up and carrying them with you all the time, which is probably the best fix for when you're out and about, is using a dummy battery. Now this replaces your battery and connects to the mains power and constantly powers your camera. You can pick one of these up for around £25, $25, so not too expensive, and is certainly a good fix for when you're using your camera stationary. Like I am here, I can constantly have the camera powered without worrying about the battery running out. So those are 5 of my issues with the Sony ZV-E10. But don't worry, I do still highly recommend this camera, even though these issues can be a pain. Are there any issues with this camera that I've missed? Let me know in the comments below. But as always, if you've enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on the video. But until next time, see ya.